Been a while. Granted, I don't think nearly a quarter of the people who watched that video will be back, but I thank you all for the support anyways. I remember waking up and seeing the number of people that watched and was absolutely blown away. Man, I was so mad I couldn't find the time to capitalize off that video, but I had to finish school, and honestly, what a relief that is. I remember wanting so badly to go to Full Sail University after high school, even though it was super unrealistic. I earned a scholarship for the school, but when your tuition is $80,000 not including utilities, I was out of my mind. I ended up spending a college semester's amount of time at home after high school, mostly because I was depressed about not being able to afford my dream school and more than likely having to attend a community college. But when I went to Moraine Valley Community College, it may have been my best experience in college overall. It wasn't great, but it was nice. I got an associate's degree there before going to Columbia College Chicago, and honestly, not a fan of this school, but I did accomplish some pretty good things there. Pretty much all the animations you're seeing were from my time there. We made a short film that I don't think I can show personally, but I'm pretty sure I can show some of the rough animations I did for it. The short film is called Natural Powers. I'll send links out when I'm given confirmation that we can share the film. Anyways, I'm feeling pretty good. Finishing my last assignment was better than killing a Valkyrie in God of War. I know that's pretty random, but I just got to replaying the game. I got my bachelor's now, so I just gotta find something to do with it. Enough about my school life. I know you might be wondering why on earth I keep changing the look of my channel. Well, I'm just trying to find my style. My favorite animated movie is The Incredibles, so I thought I'd base my channel around that. I will say this is kinda nice. I think I may stick with it. Well, now that we're all caught up, I'm excited to begin part 2 of this tier list. I think you all enjoyed the incorporation of my artwork, so I think I'll make it a tradition with these tier lists, which FYI means these tier lists will be rare on this channel. I hope I'm not stealing any ideas by merging tiers with art. I just think it makes the videos more interesting. Oh, and before I begin, there are a couple films I won't be reviewing in this video. That'd be Spirit Untamed, Orion in the Dark, Kung Fu Panda 4, and Joseph King of Dreams. I haven't seen any of these yet, and Joseph King of Dreams might be one of those I may never get to in these tier lists specifically, but we'll see. So ignore that it's labeled not watching. Now, with that being said, I again thank you all for the support on part 1. Now let's continue with part 2.
Why can't you follow the simplest orders?
I can't stop myself. I see a dragon and I have to just kill it, you know? It's who I am, Dad.
Let's start this off right. We all know how good this is. I remember the first time I saw this movie, they just launched us into an epic battle, expertly introducing us to lovable characters, and it really blows you away. This movie followed a boy named Hiccup who wants to prove to himself and his father that he's a Viking like everyone else, even if he's different. Throughout his journey, he becomes the first Viking to find companionship in dragons, but even more impressive, companionship in the mysterious Night Fury, which he would name Toothless. By the end, Hiccup learns that the constant struggle between Vikings and dragons were meaningless. You could argue the dragons were trying to protect them from a bigger threat the entire time. We'd see this in that awesome fight scene in the end. Rewatching this part now, I was getting major House of Dragon vibes.
Get to the ships! No! No!
Also, FYI, we're Team Green over here, but I digress. I love the dynamic between Hiccup and his father. Has it been done before? Sure, but it came out in 2010, so I'm not gonna complain too much. Although, watching it again now, the whole "oh and he's my dad" thing was kinda lame. I feel like it kinda happens a lot now. The animation was done really well though, the dragon's movements felt grand and intimidating. I especially love when the Viking sends a fireball into the cave of dragons and the dragons all fly past. It was awesome because by this point we knew that there was a larger threat, and the fear in Toothless was so well animated. Like, we knew it was about to go down. Visually, the movie still looks great, although the realistic textures used on human skin I felt didn't really look as great as I remember. Still, it didn't take anything away from the film. There were some really cool cinematic choices. A couple of my favorites are Hiccup's slow approach to an injured Toothless, and when Toothless realizes he should be kind to Astrid and decides to fly more calmly. The village of Berk was awesome. I took an animation layout class, so now I'm a stickler for pretty backgrounds. So I was really tied to the environment while watching this. And man, the village of Berk is so cool. I still have to get the art book for this movie, but I can't wait because they did such an amazing job making this village look and feel, well, Viking. I think my favorite character in this movie was Hiccup. I just think he never gave up. I think many of us know what it's like trying to impress our fathers, and so Hiccup was pretty relatable for me. And his voice was hilarious though, seeing as I watch wrestling, and I kept thinking this dude was Seth Rollins. Overall, like many films, I'm going to want to do a deep dive into this one in the future, but for now, I gotta give this one S tier. And yes, above my beloved Kung Fu Panda, even though it's like my favorite DreamWorks movie, but we can't let the biases win.
I hope this turns out better than your plan to cook rice in your stomach by eating it raw and then drinking boiling water.
This plan's nothing like that plan.
How?
Because this one's gonna work.
Okay, DreamWorks, I dub you the king of sequels, and so far we're on the right track. Kung Fu Panda 2 is amazing. My goodness, I mean, this video we talk about a lot of great films, but this one gets me every freaking time. I tear up every time I see that inner peace scene, but what is this about? Well, of course we follow our guy Po, who is trying to learn of his past as he and the Furious Five look to defeat Lord Shin and his dangerous weapon to save Kung Fu. This film had this crazy epic feeling about it, like they really knew how to get you hyped, and did a really good job making you calm down, laugh, get sad, or simply get angry. I think the music obviously played a big part. By the way, Hans Zimmer and John Powell killed it. God, the music was so good. The intro sequence was very unique. I'm not too sure how they animated it, perhaps it was shadow puppetry of some sorts. I'm gonna make a video about this animated film called The Adventures of Prince Ahmed in the future, but anyways, perhaps they did something similar to that, just entirely digital rather than using real puppets. Of course, don't quote me on that, but I thought the way they did Lord Shin's backstory was masterful, and the emotion. These puppets were animated so well. I felt the pain Lord Shin's parents had when they saw him after he slaughtered the pandas.
Shen returned to his parents full of pride, but in their faces, he saw only horror.
Like seriously, this movie has no business being this good. The lore was awesome too. I thought the other masters were great additions to the film. Their introduction alone was awesome, but seeing how their characters developed in the prison only elevated Lord Shin so much more, and I loved it. Also, this scene,
Keep moving.
like, why are they going so hard on this? The personal moments between Tigress and Po were great. You can tell how as time passed, you really gained a newfound respect for Po. It's hard for me to pinpoint what I didn't like about this one. I guess the other Furious 5 members felt flat character-wise, but to be fair, there are a ton of characters, and trying to give 5 characters individual arcs can be very difficult and hard to pack into an hour-and-a-half movie. Still, a minor critique that doesn't stop this scene alone from making this film peak.
Shen! A panda stands between you and your destiny! What?
Okay, I get it. This is what you really want to see. Oh, 10-year-old me was so hyped. The animation took a huge leap from the first, and the first wasn't bad at all. As mentioned earlier, the inner peace scenes were so good. It was where I found the movie to look its best. Gloomy settings often make art look so realistic. The settings were all really beautiful, especially the palace. I think my favorite character in this had to be Po. I know it's lame for main characters to be a favorite, but I just thought he was so good in this. His backstory, his father-son bonding, and how he overcame Shin when it felt like all hope was lost. Po is just goated. He's also voiced by Jack Black, so there's that too. Anyways, this one goes S tier for me. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but honestly, I have this over the original Kung Fu Panda. I just think it expands on everything, so yeah, I think I'm okay putting it there.
I've been kidnapped by the village idiot.
Who's the bigger idiot? The idiot or the idiot who gets kidnapped by the idiot?
During my binge for all these movies, it never occurred to me that Antz was DreamWorks' first animated film. Well look, you gotta start somewhere, and though the story was okay, the CGI on this was ugly. I'm kidding, but it did come out in 1998 in a time where 3D animation was still very new, and 2D animation was still buzzing. I mean, even DreamWorks was preparing the release of Prince of Egypt that same year, only a couple months later at that. But the real story is that this movie came out the same year as A Bug's Life, and I never understood why people call Antz a copy since it released a month earlier than A Bug's Life. That is until I did a bit of digging and found on the Cinema Ensemble website that according to James Guild, Antz was a stolen idea that was rushed into production by a former Disney employee who wanted to get revenge on Disney. Jeffrey Katzenberg, former producer at Disney, learned of A Bug's Life from John Lasseter, who was one of the movie's creators. Katzenberg then stole the idea and rushed it into production. Luckily, Pixar still did much better in the box office. But anyways, what was this about? Well, it followed an ant that was unsure of himself and wanted to find a place for himself in the world. He then finds the love of his life, but she's a princess. He has no idea how a lowly worker could ever have a chance with royalty, but in his journey they find a way. It doesn't come easy though, because they are dealing with an ethnocentrist, I think. I don't know, I was trying to find the right word for the guy and racist didn't feel like the right term, but anyways, he's a bad guy who believes the soldier division of ants are far superior to other ants, so he looks to eradicate all the ants in the worker division. I'm watching this film like, man, this guy is insane or he's just a Viltrumite. I guess I should get into what I liked. The princess was fun to watch. I felt she was the star in every scene she was in. Sylvester Stallone's character Weaver was probably my favorite. Just a really laid back guy who wants to put others above himself, and that's really apparent near the end of the film. The sequence early in the film when the ants are sent off to a suicide mission to wipe out a colony of termites was done really well, and great foreshadowing to the slight edginess that we would come to know and love about DreamWorks. Barbados, the soldier who meets a gruesome end during this battle, was powerful, and would do wonders for the character progression of Z. There was a lot to like about this one, but speaking of Z, I wasn't feeling him. It could have been the voice acting, which although sounded good technically, the character just didn't come off as charming as I think the film really wanted him to. He was still a hero, and he was from start to finish even with all the arrogant little quips. If it wasn't for him, Weaver would probably be dead, and as the film goes on, we find that all the workers may have died too. Speaking of this, let's talk about Colonel Cutter. This man deserves no flowers, and I stand on that 10 toes. Sure, he prevented Mandible from killing the ants, but he sure took a long time. Honestly, look at this.
It is time for a new beginning. The hell is that?
I think that's the weak element, sir.
It may seem harmless, but had Z not reached the surface, Cutter probably would have watched the massacre along with the rest of those soldiers. But hey, at least he showed empathy. Then there's Mandible. I liked his motivation, but he lacked the charisma that you're looking for in a villain. I didn't mind his one-dimensional nature, I just felt his character was a bit dull. I didn't really like the look of the film, but it was understandable given the time period, and I wouldn't be surprised if animators were overworked given the production was apparently rushed. Nonetheless, they did an amazing job with what they had at the time, and they were able to pull off some pretty convincing facial expressions too. There was never a moment where I felt Princess Bala and Z weren't in love. Look at those bug eyes.
You're beautiful. A little combative at times, but I think we can work on that.
You talk too much.
That's love, man. The setting was really cool too. I thought it was funny because the picnic seemed like the kind of insectopia us viewers were thinking of. Then later we see that it's actually a nasty trash spot and you're like, this is magnificent. Overall, Antz was a good movie to watch for the first time. I can't give it an A tier as I didn't love it, and they've made drastically better films. Hell, they made one that same year. But it was a hell of a start to the studio regardless of how awful the pre-production part of it was, so I think I'll give this one a B.
Any of the supplies make it?
Well, yes and no.
Oh, great!
I don't know how to feel about this one. First of all, greatest design in all fiction. But look, this movie just didn't do it for me. It was beautiful, of course, but it didn't feel like a DreamWorks movie. Actually, this felt more like DreamWorks' attempt at a Disney film, which makes all the more sense given its failure critically and in the box office that they would make Shrek the next year. Which I think we all believe was the first movie where DreamWorks found their identity. Now, regardless of that, I did like some things, but let's do an awful job summarizing it first. The Road to El Dorado is about two con men, Tulio and Miguel, who are after a lost city, but not just any lost city, but the City of Gold. Now, they eventually stumble into this lost city, and by using their wit and some religious prophecies, that these two con men convince an entire group of people that they were gods. This leads to an unlikely trio working together to get what they want, but ultimately they learn that maybe what they're doing isn't right. Like I said, I'm not a good summarizer. Anyways, what did I like about this film? Well, to be honest, the only thing I liked about this film was the ending. You see, they could have gone with a cliche massive battle, which in a way there was, but not really. I just love how Zekel Khan's character meets his demise. I mean, this guy was a likable kind of evil at first, but when he betrayed his people to help the Spanish find their city, I was disgusted.
It only takes a little bit of white brainwash to activate the coon chip.
I like that ending a lot since it truly felt different, but here is when we get to what I didn't like. Beginning with the music. I mean, oh my goodness, they weren't horrible, but it felt like it wanted to be Disney so bad. Like, it's worse than the pop music thing Disney is doing now. Well, no, it's not. It's better since the pop thing Disney is growing accustomed to is kind of bland. Like, did you hear the villain song in Disney's Wish? But anyways, the songs here are good enough that I'm not cringing most of the time. Of course, there is charm in that, and I think part of the nostalgia that we carry for these films comes from some of the cringiness of those eras, but I just felt the movie would have been just fine without the musical elements. There were apparently some controversy about the film's white savior complex. I guess you can say that. I know it's based on various indigenous cultures, and usually when you tell stories involving those of color, you try to be as careful as possible not to offend anyone. But this,
Whoa! My lords?
would have driven the Dr. Umar crowd into madness had this story been based around black people. Anyways, the animation itself was amazing. DreamWorks 2D animation style is so slept on, man. That's an understatement, by the way. And while I was drawing these characters, I now realize why people forget that DreamWorks made 2D films. There's so few of them. I really wish they would bring it back. But the film's aesthetic was breathtaking, and the City of Gold was a wonder to look at. I think all in all, I want to give this film an A tier based on the animation alone, but I think I'll have to settle for a B tier, which I don't think I should be so controversial with a YouTube career that's barely started. Look at it this way, it's slightly over mid. Mid is okay on its own. Don't forget, these are all opinions, people.
How long has it been, Sergeant?
Sir?
The Mustang. How long has it been tied?
3 days, sir.
Good. Fetch my crop and spurs.
This movie blew me away. I have to admit I was worried earlier in the film during the intro because there was a lot of CG used that looked kinda iffy, but it was 2002 and it didn't look awful. I was glad to see that the majority of the film utilized 2D and it didn't disappoint. This film follows a wild Mustang who longs to keep his freedom and return home in a time where European invaders were at odds with the natives to the land. Anytime a story can be told with a character who doesn't speak, it's the job of the animators to convey the emotional beats in each scene. I genuinely cared about this horse. The music plays a major role in this as well. I can't play it obviously, but Bryan Adams and Hans Zimmer did a hell of a job here. Get Off My Back was one of my favorite songs not only because it elevated the scene alone, but it fit well with the story. It's no Hellfire, but for the first time I was genuinely impressed with DreamWorks in regards to their music because You Can't Take Me had your boy getting a little misty-eyed. The animators did a good job making you feel Spirit's helplessness. This scene hurt because you knew the torture finally got to him, and you couldn't help but feel his agony. I really liked Little Creek as well. It can be sort of a roll your eyes moment because the natives were domesticating horses same as the Europeans. Granted, I don't think the natives were branding them. Little Creek did let them go in the end too, so I respect them for that. My favorite moments came here. The Colonel is still a bad guy both in the film and what he represents in the real world. I respect that he realized he could never break Spirit though. He let him go realizing that he had been beaten, something I don't believe the Colonel is accustomed to. The end of the film brought us back to the very beginning where the horses were running with the wind. They panned to the sky showing the horse-shaped clouds. A closing visual that calls back to the opening visual is a technique usually used in short films, so it was really cool to see here, and even better that I was able to remember it in a film over an hour and a half long. The environments were all painted beautifully. There were some scenes that genuinely felt real. I can't believe how little this movie is talked about. As much as I love this movie, it's difficult for me to put this in S tier, but I will put it in A tier. Poor Rise of the Guardians just keep getting moved further and further back.
You still fight like an old lady. Sinbad?
Alright, so this was my first time watching Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas, and wow, how did I never hear about this? It came out in 2003, the same year Brother Bear, Tokyo Godfathers, and Finding Nemo would be released. Apparently the movie bombed, which is unfortunate but not surprising. Why? Well, it's complicated. If you watched my Disney Must Free Pixar video, then you know that between 1995 to 2010, Pixar was in its prime years, or simply their golden age. So Nemo, one of their best films, coming out 2 months before Sinbad in a time where 3D animation was taking over, and studios treating 2D films as a thing of the past, made its box office failure not too surprising. It makes me sad because I love this film, and my ranking for this may surprise you. We'll see. So Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas follows a charismatic pirate who is forced to embark on a journey to recover the stolen Book of Peace from the wicked goddess of chaos alongside his crew and his best friend's future wife. This pirate doesn't have long. He must complete his mission in 10 days or his friend will be executed. Now, what did I like about this film? First off, what else is there to say? But nah, what I love most about watching these old movies is that villains were actually villains. It made a lot of sense too. Eris is a real goddess, a Greek goddess. Now I'm no expert, but when I did my Googling, I found that in Greek mythos, she is a goddess of strife and discord. And if you know anything about those two words, then you know that all DreamWorks did was simplify it by calling her the goddess of chaos. All that to say, it's in her nature to stir things up. And I love nothing more than powerful characters that value their word over their power. Eris was never a dull moment in this film, but she messed me up earlier in this film because I have this thing called megalophobia. And there was a part in this film where Sinbad nearly drowns. He's down there in the dark blue sea and suddenly you see this giant monster approaching him and it was making a brother anxious. And yes, while drawing her, I was genuinely getting even more anxious. It's crazy, man. But regardless, her chemistry with Sinbad shined. And you can attribute that of course to the animation, but even more from the masterful voice acting done by Michelle Pfeiffer and Brad Pitt. He's done voice acting? Wow. You learn something new every day. But speaking of Sinbad, the guy was extremely fun to watch. Although I don't think I would ever be friends with this guy, but we'll get to that. Marina was awesome in this film. My favorite scene from her was when she proved herself to the Croods during the Sirens attack, and the Croods themselves were lovable too. Sinbad's right-hand kill was obviously loyal to the captain, but you could tell he was always skeptical of Sinbad's don't-care attitude. But then there's the lore. There were some scenes here that absolutely blew me away. I didn't know what was original from DreamWorks or taken out of Greek mythos, but man, when they landed on this island only to find out it was a giant fish, and the light I have no idea the name of was lighting the surrounding area as if posing for the sun was genius. Then there's that giant bird, which was a cool chase sequence by the way. And once they reached the edge of the world, I knew what the plan would be, but it was beautiful to watch nonetheless. Tartarus was no slouch either. The desert Sinbad and Marina land in is moving like the ocean and offers what I think is the best 3D animation in the film. There is a lot to love about this movie. I will say the story was nothing too groundbreaking, but simple can be masterful if handled with care. The CGI for most of the monsters was a bit hard to look at, I will say, but for the time, I understand. But I think my favorite character has to be Proteus. What a guy, man. He defended Sinbad way more than he should have, but here is one of the moments that truly made me respect this character.
I'm asking you for myself now. Marina, will you marry me?
Proteus,
There you are.
Man, I wish we got a definitive answer from Marina here. But looking back at it after the ending scene, look closely at Marina in this shot.
and soon it will be your responsibility.
Our responsibility.
That's how wonderful animation is. Looking at that made me realize, although I was hurt, that these two are not going to be in-game. Bro, I'm supposed to hate love stories.
And she fell in love.
Proteus,
Marina, follow your heart.
This right here made Proteus the kind of man we should all aspire to be. I do hope he found someone, and I may dive deeper into this film in a more direct video, but that's all I have on it now. I said I may surprise you with this ranking. Look, I gotta put this in S tier. I know, but I'm sorry. I loved it too much.
Pile it up, lad. I'm in the mood for food.
So I've actually never heard of this film before, so obviously I didn't see it, but it was nice to go into a film like this completely new, which would become a regular occurrence for this video. You know, it really is a fascinating story, but something about it just didn't grab me. Sometimes when I feel stumped on something, I like to get outside perspectives. Now, of course, Rotten Tomatoes isn't exactly the best source nowadays, if ever really, but this seems to be widely regarded as one of DreamWorks' best. However, for me, I'm conflicted, but I'm indifferent to it. This is a film that sort of puts its own take on the whole werewolf story. We follow Wallace and Gromit, who are pest control workers. In the town, the people in the community love them because they keep pests from eating their vegetables. Most of the story revolves around their little town having a giant vegetable festival, and it's a tradition that has been going on for I think 500 years. I'm pretty sure that was mentioned, but I may have forgotten. So the problem Wallace faces, however, is that an invention that he had built sort of switched the minds of his intellect with the rabbits. So every full moon he turns into what they call a were-rabbit. I mean, it's a really cool concept with very fun and lovable characters. Wallace is very charismatic, Toddy is great, but Victor is who I think truly stole the show. I guess he had this sort of personality that contrasted with the rest of the town that sort of set him apart. It wasn't the most charismatic performance, and that's the thing. As much as I love the characters, none of them feel truly memorable for me. And here's the thing, I really hope none of you are pounding at the chest right now because I see this film as very highly regarded, but I don't know. Again, the characters were good, they just didn't feel larger than life, I guess. Bad way to put it, I know, but I think you understand. I did like the animation though. Of course, you can never go wrong with stop motion. There were moments where you can see the little toothpick marks inside of Wallace's mouth that really just shows how much effort and time were put into this film. With a character like Gromit who doesn't speak, they were exaggerative with the animations enough that it was always pretty easy to understand the point he was trying to convey. Is exaggerative a word? I hope so. Anyways, I really love the backgrounds, and I love the reveal of the were-rabbit and Victor's reaction to it. Overall, I don't think this movie is an S tier film for me. Oh man, you guys are gonna hate me. I might have to give this film a B tier. Look, I know you guys love it, and I liked it. Don't worry though. So far, it's definitely right there with Madagascar for me.
I think he's dead.
Oh, really? Do you, in fact, have an associate's degree from Vermtech? I think he wants you to think he's dead.
I don't even know how many times I watched Over the Hedge. It was always on TV when I was growing up, so it became a childhood classic for me. The story follows a raccoon named RJ who, after attempting to steal a bear's stash, is threatened to get it all back or be hunted down. He meets a family of woodland critters who he would take advantage of, but after he gets what he thought he needed, he learns that all he truly needed was family. Because this film is a classic for me, I may be a little biased, but trust me, I've never considered this an S tier film or anything like that. Rewatching it for this video, I never realized that Gladys wasn't all that crazy. But when she goes on a tangent about property value, then you see RJ throwing her trash everywhere, as an adult, you start to feel a little bad for her. She's crazy, sure, but tell me this wouldn't freak you out.
Look, it's not you. It won't work, okay? Because I'm a...
If I saw this after just waking up a moment ago, I'd go insane too. I laughed a lot watching this. I especially love this scene.
The moon's not full. You woke me up a week early? Oh no.
I don't know why this made me laugh so hard. It's just his reaction was like, I know you're not taking all my food. Because why did RJ have to take everything? He didn't leave the bear a thing. I love the side characters. They didn't all have arcs, but for those who did, it would be small moments that didn't hurt the pacing at all. Heather and Ozzy, for example. Ozzy wanted to impress his daughter. It took a while, but by the end he won her over. Another one was Stella. She thought no one would ever love her, but by the end she found someone, and that was nice to see. Other characters didn't have major arcs outside of Vern and RJ, but the film still did a good job making you care about the family. Speaking of Vern, he had to overcome dealing with the new guy who was changing everything around him. He eventually realized that his jealousy was hurting the family as a whole, so once he learns that he was right in his suspicions of RJ, of course he was upset, but he was the first to give RJ a second chance. RJ let us down when it looked as though he was gonna ditch the family, but it was a great moment seeing him risk his own life for once to save them. My favorite character had to be Dr. Dennis. The man was a show stealer. Also his design, very nice. There wasn't much to dislike about this movie for me. It just didn't hold a lot of weight, I guess. I don't know, there's definitely some nostalgia that carries it for me, but I do think this is a fun watch. To tier this is kinda difficult. I could put it in either B or C tier. I guess I'll give it a C. I do like this one. To be fair, I like all the C tier movies. I don't know how this generation made mid a bad thing.
He's just a little bee, and he happens to be the nicest bee I've met in a long time.
Long time? What are you talking about?
Going into the B movie was no surprise for me. I watched this movie time and time again as a kid. It was fun, whimsical, but the story was where I think it truly missed the mark. The bee movie is about a bee named Barry that is interested in the world and what it has to offer rather than the tedious work bees are forced to do in the hive. It leads him to discovering that humans were stealing honey from bees and using it to make money, so he decides to sue the human race. Look, there's a lot to like about this movie. The dialogue, great. The humor, sometimes cringe, but most times funny.
Living out our lives as honey slaves to the white man!
The characters were amazing, especially Ken. Ken was the best. I mean, Patrick Warburton has to have the most distinct voice ever. I think the court scenes were great. The lawyer voiced by John Goodman was fun to hear as he reminded me of Big Daddy, pause, from Princess and the Frog. Vanessa was good too, but man, rewatching the film now, as much as I liked it, as much as I laughed, I have a hard time understanding what the point was. I know Barry doesn't want to be a stir like his father. He wants to be a pollen jock as that's his best chance at really seeing the world. But the problem is that by the end, it seemed like that would have never been an issue for Barry. Was he smaller than the other pollen jocks? Yes, but he didn't fly slower. He had the same weaknesses as the others. And the jocks themselves were actually really cool people.
You ever see pollination up close? No, sir. I pick up some pollen over here, sprinkle it over here. Maybe a dash over there, pinch on that one. See that? It's a little bit of magic, ain't it? Wow.
Outside of a few doubters, Barry still had the opportunity to be a pollen jock, and some people doubting him never felt like a true obstacle. Anyways, the story truly kicked off when Barry found out about the honey. So the pollen jock thing was really just a way to get Barry out of the hive, which, okay. So the story at this point becomes anti-capitalist, which is actually a pretty creative premise when incorporating the bees. Showing the tense labor, the small reward for that labor if any at all. Again, it was very creative. However, as the movie progresses, we see that nature is collapsing because of the lack of honey being produced after the bees stopped making honey after winning the lawsuit. The problem with this is that by the end, the bees realize that in order for nature to be preserved, they must continue working. So, capitalism good. Yeah, well, at least Barry became a pollen jock. Although, again, it was never really anything standing in his way. My goodness, I went this whole time without mentioning the fact that this bee wanted to have sex with a human. And the brother Ken was actually jealous. Why did I love this movie as a kid? B movie? No. Sorry, 6-year-old me, but this is a D movie. D as in dog.
I'm in my prime here. I'm terminal, you know? Yeah. Probably only have another 2 days left to live.
When it comes to the Madagascar franchise, we all know the story won't always be the strongest, but the adventure and the comedy would be the things that carries the film. However, the story here surprised me much more than I expected. Beginning the film, we see Alex, or rather Alek's backstory. We see that Alex has always been different from other lions and his father had a difficult time accepting that. While his father is distracted, Alex wanders off stumbling into humans and obviously the humans take him. This leads to a chase scene where you're hoping that Zuba can somehow get Alex back, but we already know that's not the case. We cut to the present day where the story truly kicks off. Alex, Marty, and friends are making their leave from Madagascar by plane by way of the first film, but couldn't make it too far. Instead, they would end up crash landing on the African continent. Here they find zebras, giraffes, hippos, and most importantly, lions. Alex reunites with his family, and although things are pretty good at first, things shift in a ritual-like battle with Titi that would lead to Alex being banished. Throughout the rest of the film, the story becomes more about Alex finding a way back to the Pride when learning that they were running out of water. Since Makunga wasn't much hope, it was up to Alex to take the opportunity. I found this movie super enjoyable, probably the best in the franchise for me so far. Each character had a good arc that really sold it for me. Melman and Gloria had a decent romance arc that had a satisfying conclusion. She saves him from being sacrificed after realizing that they were meant for each other. Melman said some nice things to her early on that I think obviously shifted her focus from Moto Moto to Melman because this can only get you so far. Then there's Marty, who admittedly has the weakest plot, but I think brought some hilarious moments. He was happy most of the film because he was finally able to run with the zebras, something he wanted in the first movie, but then he started to notice that the zebras were like a carbon copy of one another, which only got worse when he realized that Alex couldn't tell them apart.
Yeah, fine. Run away, Marty. Run away. That's what you do best, just like back in New York.
I'm right here, but you can't tell that, right?
I could not stop laughing here. They eventually resolved their issues. It was a cute moment, but I still thought it was one of the weaker plots in the film. I thought Makunga was okay, not memorable or anything like that, but he did serve a purpose in the film where it felt like he definitely needed to be there. By the end is where things really get good. Alex finally gets to show his father what makes him the king of New York, and it was cool to see them bond.
Dad, what are you doing? I'm dancing with my son. I think.
After this, the penguins nearly off them all, but they ram into the dam that would bring water back to the animals. It was a sweet ending. Skipper got married to a doll, and all was right with the world. The animation was great here, and again, the visual comedy this franchise pulls off is always a treat to watch. Ultimately, I enjoyed this more than the first, so I think my ranking for Madagascar Escape to Africa will be A tier.
Are you a ghost?
There had better be an amazing explanation for this.
Speak, apparition.
Everyone loves a good spin on the idea of Superman, Goku, Homelander, and now Metro Man. Very nice, but an even cooler twist came from the concept of Megamind.
Dream life filled with luxury? Apparently not. Even fate picks its favorites.
Instantly, the dynamic between these two became super engaging for me, and I couldn't get enough of their time on screen together. So Megamind is about a big-headed blue alien who crash landed on Earth the same time as Markiplier. The two of them had contrasting lives. Metro Man lived beloved by all, while Megamind lived in solitude and resented by others. As he tries to convince himself that he is meant to be a villain, after many mistakes he learned that good things come to those who are in fact good. God, I'm so bad at summarizing stories. Well, anyways, what's not to love? Megamind is such a fun lead. You can tell early that he's trying too hard to be a villain, so by the end it gels well together when he ultimately becomes good. He's funny, his facial expressions are god tier, and his bromance with Minion is just so awesome. Roxanne was a great character too. Sometimes reporters can be pretty annoying in movies and shows, especially in shows about superheroes, but she had this charm to her that was really fun to watch. And once Bernard, well, Megamind, but Megamind disguised as Bernard, once he starts interacting with Roxanne, do I really start to love her character even more. Jonah Hill's character, oh boy, he's an incel, and by God, he's more relevant now than ever. It made sense that he turned out to be a villain even before Megamind pushed him to his limit. Guys like him just aren't truly good. It's even worse actually, they think they are. I walked away from this film finding each character a lot of fun, even the Warden. I also love when everyone celebrates Megamind's victory. Metro Man is there in disguise, proud of him, and I was glad they didn't Lego Batman and Joker him.
You mean nothing to me. No one does.
Like, these two actually gained a friendship over the years. To be fair though, Megamind is hardly a bad guy. I mean, compared to Joker, he's no more dangerous than Screwball in those Insomniac games. Bruh, why did I remind myself of that? Good thing they weren't in the second game. There wasn't much I didn't like about this movie. As mentioned earlier, I found myself only wanting more interactions with Megamind and Metro Man. Regardless, what we got served the movie well. The animation was no slouch either. The giant Megamind head still blows my mind. There were some cool settings, and they all had a consistent vibe, like a semi-futurist type of thing. Overall, I think I'd give this movie an A. It was really good and a pleasant rewatch after so long.
Be cool! Be cool! Hi, officer. Is there a problem?
Hi.
I swear, the creators behind this franchise do hard drugs, although this was actually more tame than the first two movies. This story followed our favorite band of zoo escapees wanting to go back to New York. To do that, they would have to go to Monte Carlo to find the penguins, and force them to help them find their way home. This would put them in the crosshairs of Captain Chantel Dubois. Chantel is one crazy lady. Her pursuit of the animals leads to our friends joining a circus, and together not only do they make it to America, but they help our circus friends regain their passion. I was worried early in the film because this franchise reuses a lot of story plots. Like, I get New York is far away, but we've been using this plot line for like every movie at this point. But that wasn't my issue. I was more worried here.
Let me drop down. I'll grab the penguin.
You don't have fingers, Marty. These are things a leader has to think of.
Why should you be a leader? Why not me?
Man, I was so worried we were about to go through another story where Marty and Alex have to make up again, but luckily that wasn't the case. The introduction of Chantel was really exciting. The whole chase sequence was a thrill, but the movie really kicks off when we meet the circus animals. Vitaly, Stefano, Gia, Sonia, well, at least she gave Julian something to do. They were great additions to the franchise. I like Vitaly's story, his rise and fall. I like that Stefano explained how as he lost his passion, the others did too. And if you don't believe that's realistic, ask the average Chicago Bulls fan how realistic it is. I'll miss this group, especially DeMar, but thank God we're rebuilding, I think. Anyways, this movie definitely felt different from the rest. There were personal moments, but not nearly as much as the first two movies. Some notable ones I remember was when Alex, Marty, Melman, and Gloria make it back to the zoo, and they realize that the place they've been longing to return to wasn't nearly as great as the life they found for themselves in the wild. I especially like this scene.
Guys, I'm sorry I ever left the zoo in the first place.
Leaving the zoo was the best thing that ever happened to us.
This was great because Alex was right. If it wasn't for Marty, they would have never known what life could have been like had they stayed in the zoo. Another personal moment was when the circus animals found out they were really zoo animals. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of this moment because, I mean, be real. You're telling me that y'all can't understand why they lied to get on the train? Why they lied about being circus animals? Like, I get it. Circus sticks together or whatever, but I just felt they were over-exaggerating. You know, I've been to the Soul Circus, but I wouldn't mind checking out one of these type of circuses as much as I hate clowns. You could tell the animators had a lot of fun doing these sequences. Honestly, the Madagascar franchise is like the only CG franchise of the late 2000s to early 2010s that reminds me of 2D animation, solely based on the animation techniques. Like, they love getting weird with the characters, doing things that don't make sense outside of animation, and you never second guessed it. The circus scene gives me Simba's I can't wait to be king vibes. I did love this movie. It wasn't as funny as the first movie, and the story didn't impact me as much as the second, but I still enjoyed this film. Ultimately, I think I'll give this a B tier.
Ha! It's scared of the dark. Wait, we're scared of the dark.
The Croods surprised me back in 2013. It came out the same year alongside a bunch of other middle-of-the-pack animated films. Back in 2013, I was 11 going on 12, so going to the theater was fairly rare. I was lucky enough to see at least one movie that year, and that movie ended up being Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, which I only got to see since it came out on September 27th, which is my cousin's birthday, and a day after my birthday, which falls on September 26th. So yeah, my birthdays were pretty cool when I was a kid. Since I missed a lot of the theatrical releases of these animated films, I was left catching up with them at home or during the final days of school. All that to say, my ranking for the Croods may be a bit biased. Why, you may ask? Because I was watching this movie alongside Turbo, Epic, and Kumba, so yeah, Croods was a godsend. This film follows a family of cavemen who fear the outside world, specifically at night, as they are perceived to be the last people on Earth. This comes until they meet Guy, who kicks off this story, where he will be the crucial element to helping this family escape a continental drift. What I loved most about this film was obviously the family, just so different and charismatic. Gran being the crazy old lady, Sandy being the crazy old baby. I'm joking. But these were the weaker characters I wanted to get out of the way. Thunk being a character who wants to impress his father, Uga being someone who is the wisest of the bunch, being the glue of the family, Eep being the most curious of them all, Guy being the creative and knowledgeable antagonist to Grug, who is the protective father who has to overcome his own fears to let his family truly live. Each of these characters, and Belt. But each of these characters were fun to travel this dangerous world with. I never felt like they were going to die or anything like that, at least not early on, but there were some tense scenes that really surprised me. My favorite character was Grug. He had what I believe most viewers would consider the most relatable arc, as he simply just wanted to keep his family alive in a world of some pretty dangerous beasts. Okay, I guess not that relatable. Well, actually... Anyways, but seeing as though his obsession with fear would have ultimately gotten him killed, it was nice to see him develop into a character that understood that he needed to make some changes. Guy and Eep's relationship was fine, but it didn't do much for me. At least not in this film, but I did enjoy any scene Guy was involved in with the family. He was introducing new ideas and gadgets to them that made their dynamic really fun to watch. What I loved most about this film was near the end where Grug chooses to give his life and leave them to Guy. I low-key got emotional here, even more so when I was younger when I actually did think he might die, but even now this scene was heart-wrenching. And I get chills whenever I see the part where they all blow into those shells to call out to him into this giant wall of smoke. It was powerful and made the end of the film that much more satisfying. It's weird that there isn't much of anything here that makes me dislike this film. I genuinely love it. The animation was really good for 2013. Not that the films at that time looked bad, I just think compared to the stuff we see now, man, we are eating. The setting was really unique. I found the cinematography to be a big part of what helped sell the environments. Like, check this out.
That's right. You can't get past this!
That shot was super iconic for me. I had to rewatch the film for this video since the last I saw it was in 2013, but even during my rewatch, I remembered this scene for being directed so well. This film used the rule of thirds to a T, and it resulted in some pretty beautiful shots. Ultimately, The Croods was a pleasant rewatch, which is always good. I do love this film, but comparing it to my S and A tier movies, I don't know, man. I may have to settle for a B tier. A very high B though, I just can't put it above Madagascar.
Nobody move!
Sherman, I've got to get you out of here before you touch yourself.
Rewatching Mr. Peabody and Sherman was really fun. I know I saw this film when I was 13, but I never really rewatched it back then. But man, it's a really entertaining film. This film was about an accomplished dog who alongside his adopted son travels through time with a machine he built called the Way Back. After a few setbacks, the two navigate through time alongside a girl named Penny to find a way home as Mr. Peabody tries to prove why he deserves to raise Sherman. Okay, I think I may have overcomplicated that, but you get the point. Look, I enjoyed this movie a lot, but there were some things that tuned me out. Time travel in any story can be a bit tough to watch for me. Maybe because in these kinds of stories, history can often be inaccurate, or simply because everything becomes convoluted. When the time travel aspects were simply about Mr. Peabody using his invention to teach Sherman history, I felt that was when the time aspects were at its best. Enough of what I didn't like though, since there were many things that I did. First of all, the beautiful boy scene was so heartfelt. I mean, the song itself is great, but I loved how they showed audiences that they've been going on these historical trips for a long time. I also loved how they showed how Mr. Peabody and Sherman found each other, which translates well to his own past. Peabody had overcome the pain of never being adopted into a home, so when he found Sherman in the same situation one night, he decided to take him in.
When I found Sherman, it reminded me of how I started out in life. And now I want to give him the one thing I always wanted. A home.
Also, at that scene, I really liked the animation here. I felt this was where the film was at its most stylistic. Simply put, the beautiful boy scene was the best scene in the film for me. I thought the villain, or antagonist I think, whatever, Miss Grunion did a good job irritating me, so I guess she served her purpose. I also think it made sense for Sherman to like her since they were really young, so I guess it's not far off that they'd end up liking each other. Penny's parents deserved more screen time though, I don't know. I may have to knock off a couple points for their lack of screen time, huh? I'm just kidding. But yeah, it wasn't a bad movie. It's just since time was so important to the film, I felt they really needed to nail that, and unfortunately I don't think they did. Also, this movie came out in 2014. I was surprised because I thought the animation was fine, but it did feel slightly dated. Knowing the Lego movie came out the same year though, I see why this movie may have been swept under the rug. By the way, I had no idea this movie was based on a 1959 cartoon.
One moment, sir.
And what do you want, Mutt?
The name, sir, is Peabody, and I intend to adopt this boy. Naturally, the newspapers made a big thing of it.
They certainly did their thing with the voice casting for the 2014 one. Overall, I didn't hate this film like others did. It definitely had frustrating moments with the time plot near the end, but there were so many charming moments. I loved the Mona Lisa scene. Overall, I think I'll give this film a C. It's a right in the middle of the pack kind of film for me. Man, this one really hit me. This is actually the first time I ever watched How to Train Your Dragon 2. I never got the chance to see it in the past, and I really wish I did sooner because I was definitely missing out. This story follows Hiccup and Toothless as they try to prevent a war with Drago. In this, we're treated to a first-time look at Hiccup's mom, and to get a deeper dive into the lore of this dangerous yet beautiful world. I really like how they started the film, specifically once we got to Hiccup and Toothless. They definitely got the best fighting scenes. I thought it was cool that they were still adjusting to flying with one another even with their setbacks. Astrid and Hiccup got a small opportunity to show how their relationship has gone over the last 5 years, and it surprised me how natural they were together. A lot of times writers try to force it and it kinda comes off awkward. Don't read the Avatar The Last Airbender comics, but I genuinely liked their dynamic in this film. And I kinda wanted more from them. Seeing Valka, Hiccup's mother, was really cool. I thought she was kinda slow at first because of how she was acting, but I could tell that it's just been a while since she's had human contact, and if she did, she probably had to scare them off since Drago's men were hunting dragons down. I loved when Stoic reunited with Valka. The song and dance, Hiccup's reaction to it, it was perfect. It made it all the more sad with what would eventually happen to Stoic. I have to admit, Drago was kinda disappointing, don't get me wrong. I did find him intimidating in the beginning, but he later felt less threatening since he kinda took a backseat to the dragons. The way they were building him up, I expected him to be a much bigger threat. Granted, he got a big win, but even then it was more the dragon than him. Also, what was with the yelling? I thought it was cool at first, but he did it a lot. So it became less threatening and more comedic, and not in a good way. I'm being too critical of this guy. He wasn't awful, not even bad. I think I just expected more. By the end, when Toothless challenges the Alpha Dragon, it was really beautiful to look at. The film as a whole, of course, looked so good, but I didn't think they fleshed out the other locations as well enough. I could have missed it, but outside of Burke, I don't remember hearing any other names for the locations. They were beautiful, we got some nice establishing shots, but I thought those locations were more just battlefields than characters on their own. But that's a minor critique though. What really got me was Stoic's death. It being Toothless who did it, regardless of him being controlled, really hurt. I wasn't the biggest fan of that, honestly. Especially since Hiccup was only angry with Toothless for a short while, so I thought it would have been better if Drago killed Stoic, as it would have made Drago much more threatening. Regardless, I was fine with the film overall. I wouldn't put this one in S tier, but I think A tier suffices. I am such a gentle critiquer. To be fair, I don't often review things. I love everything. Except Shark Tale.
So, how do I look?
You're hideously disfigured and will probably be hunted for sport.
So I'm of the opinion that all the Madagascar films are in that range of mediocre to good. I was excited for this one because the penguins were always funny to me. This is, however, my first time watching the movie, but I grew up on the 2008 Penguins of Madagascar TV show on Nickelodeon, so I may be slightly biased as to how much I love these characters. Nonetheless, here's the story. Taking place after Europe's Most Wanted, the penguins look to leave the circus to celebrate Private's birthday. To their surprise, the evil Dr. Octavius, no, not that one, would capture the penguins to enact his revenge on them. Why? Well, because penguins are cute, and he's tired of it. Humans didn't care about him, so he decided that the solution was to turn penguins into monsters. The penguins set out to save their kind alongside a secret agency called the North Wind, but find that it wouldn't be too easy to stop Octavius's plans. I want to start by saying I did enjoy this movie. They did a really good job balancing comedy in this, not too childish and not so serious that it's boring for the youth. Besides, after the pandemic, who can't find comedy in this?
It's not on.
Click on the button with the picture of the microphone.
Every time a villain calls in, this happens.
Hello? Hello? Well, now we can
So
hear
annoying.
you, but we cannot see you.
Every time.
There were some scenes in here that were far more enjoyable than I expected.
Crikey, we're not gonna catch it!
Where's Skipper?
Time to get creative. Start grabbing boxes, boy!
That entire scene had my eyes glued to the screen, and there were some moments that made me actually laugh out loud.
Oh, Private, stop playing with those backpacks. Find something useful. Now we're talking.
Is it silly? Sure, but that kind of comedy works for me sometimes. The main four characters were fun as you'd expect, but they weren't given much room to develop at any point. Skipper and Private were the only characters who actually had a character arc, I guess. Oh, and obviously Doc Ock, but as far as Skipper goes, he's his normal cool self for most of the film. But then after his plan gets Private captured, does he find himself at rock bottom? His character is tested when confronted about this by Classified, and he makes a very admirable decision.
All for North Wind plan.
His is better.
What?
I like this moment, but they sort of ruined his development by having Northwind's plan fail so miserably. I'll get to Private, but speaking of Northwind, they had no point being in the movie other than to give Kowalski a girlfriend. I could forgive it if the characters were interesting, but they weren't. It's not like they were unlikable, I just felt like they were pointless. Like, take this scene here.
He'd never leave a man behind.
Well, I suppose we can't all be penguins, can we?
You'd think Northwind would take this as a hint that maybe overthinking every plan will lead to failure, hence convincing them to aid Private immediately. But no, they just leave. When do we see them again? At the end of the movie. They didn't surprise the penguins during the battle with a plan to save them. No, they just showed up so that Kowalski could kiss the bird. Anyways, at least Private had a good arc. Throughout the film, he was down on himself because he didn't feel important to the team, but when he realizes that he'll have to save himself, he accepts the challenge and saves the day. I did feel bad for him in the end since he had to give up his cuteness. Like, I get they wanted to show that looks aren't important, but come on, being cute, it's his thing. I thought the animation was really good here, but ultimately, this movie could have been a special. I don't remember how successful the 2008 show was, but I'm guessing it did well since they made a movie about it. It's just that I feel strongly about Northwind not being necessary to the story. If you remove them, you're left with a significantly smaller duration of the film that to me would have been fine broadcasted on TV. Granted, the film did do relatively well in the box office, so ignore me. Overall, I did enjoy the movie. Everything involving the penguins was S-tier gold for me. Even the villain was entertaining, and seeing him lose was definitely rewarding. However, I do think the film dropped in quality once Northwind became a factor. Their existence helped develop Skipper and gave Kowalski a bird to kiss, but that could have been done without them. I was surprised by how different from the other Madagascar films this was, but all in the best ways. I think this one fits in the B tier. It has its flaws, but I really like this one.
Not them talking, you idiots! It's me talking through them. Kai!
Who? And we are back to my favorite DreamWorks franchise. You know, I saw this one back in 2016 when it first came out, and although I didn't love it as much as I did the second, I was glad to see how well it turned out as the third installment of the franchise. There was a lot to like here, and some things that didn't work the best, but ultimately I found it entertaining. We're back with Po, who once again needs to discover who he truly is so that he can master Chi. Only a powerful spirit warrior by the name of Kai has returned to the mortal realm to steal Chi instead. His efforts threaten the lives of all the Kung Fu masters, but even more sinister, he threatens the lives of the remaining pandas. Unfortunately, this one didn't feel as emotional as Kung Fu Panda 2 for me. Don't get me wrong, there were some scenes that hit like Po's father telling the truth to Po, Mr. Ping trying to uplift Po's biological dad, and even the scene where Kai destroyed Uguay's statue along with part of the palace. Like, these moments did hit, but I guess they didn't have as much weight as the second movie did. It's petty to compare this way, but I loved the second one so much that my expectations were way too high. Thinking about it further, I'm not sure if it was the pacing or what. Like, there were definitely times where the movie slowed down so that characters had time to progress in their character development, but more often than not, I guess I felt it moved way faster than it should have. Regardless, I did like the introduction to Po's dad. I felt for Mr. Ping, but come on, this guy is awesome. Every movie, hell, even in the show, why is Po even still allowed in this room? Well, I did think that Po's father lying about knowing how to master Chi fit his character. When Po was fighting the warriors in their jade form, you can see just how terrified he was watching his only son fighting such dangerous battles. Po wasn't really helping either.
Lotus, be careful! It's okay, Dad. I do this every day.
Like, come on, Po, you gotta show him what you got. I thought their makeup near the end was fine, and as mentioned earlier, the moment with the dad and Mr. Ping being the catalyst for their makeup made it even better. Although I liked his design, I wasn't feeling Kai as much. I mean, this was his situation most of the film.
Kai has returned!
Who? Like, yeah, buddy, you'll never be known like Tai Lung. He has some cool fight scenes though, but I just felt there was something lacking with him, a menacing presence that just wasn't there. Po beat him in the end, and it was a beautiful fight, but at no point did I think that an overload of Chi would be his downfall. Like, it makes sense, sure, but it felt a little abrupt, I'd say. The animation, as usual, was breathtaking. Sometimes I can't tell if 2D is being used, but the way they animate scenes sometimes give off that illusion, and it's truly something to behold. From start to finish, particularly the fight between Kai and Uguay, such a beautiful scene. The movie was gorgeous and the music magnificent. Kai's score admittedly isn't the greatest thing I've ever heard, but it's so catchy that it's oddly memorable. Some of the other songs came from the first two installments, but regardless, the music never ceases to elevate each scene. I got chills watching this movie like 1,000 times because of the score. It was good to see more Tigress in this one, although I do wish she and the rest of the five could sometimes get more development. Nonetheless, I did enjoy this movie. I can't give this an S alongside the first two movies, but I think B tier works well enough.
Oh, I can see the clouds, but I'm inside. What is this? What is this?
We call that a window.
This franchise is something else. I feel like I was on psychedelics watching this movie, but in the best way imaginable. We find ourselves back with the Croods, only this time we get a more in-depth history of Guy and meet some interesting characters from his past. To be honest, this movie could have been in one place the entire time, focusing solely on the interactions between these two families, and I'd still love it. Granted, it was, but near the end the movie got very MCU. We'll get back to that though. All the characters in this one were still lovable, Grug being the highlight for me as always, but these two right here?
I feel like we just need to help them understand that they have a bright future outside these walls.
Jerks, I mean, my goodness, but to be fair, they were funny, and understandable admittedly. But I felt so bad for Uga here.
Travel basket?
Yeah, for the road. It's got fruit, nuts, soap, more soap, and a neck pillow.
She was the one who really seemed to love this new place. Many of them did, but I could tell she was fed up with such a grueling caveman lifestyle. The addition to Guy's origin story was heartbreaking, man. Like, I couldn't imagine seeing my parents losing their life in any way, let alone something so slow and terrifying. It's crazy because they hit you with such a painful scene to start the film, then the rest of the movie is just non-stop LOL moments, but hey, it worked. I was actually extremely tired preparing to watch this, mostly because it was raining, but man, once they really start diving into these fast-paced comedy elements, it really keeps you hooked. The relationship between Eep and Guy was way better in this one. It did sort of have that Aang and Katara constantly calling each other baby for whatever reason in the comics kind of vibe, but as their relationship unraveled, you could tell that they really wanted each other, so you couldn't help but root for them. I also love Dawn. She's such an adorable character that you really understand when you see how controlling her parents are. Also, my favorite scene definitely was the man cave scene.
It's hot in here. Grog, you might be more comfortable if you removed your fur pelt.
I already did.
Right.
The writers were cooking, and so was Grug.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Yeah, I know. The Bettermans were a really fun addition to this story. I mentioned earlier, but The Incredibles is my favorite animated movie, so the dinner scene was very enjoyable for me as scenes like those feel so grounded. Oh, and I almost forgot. I love the very end where Sandy fist bumps Grug. It was so cute, man. Now, what I didn't like about this movie is what prevented this one from being perfect for me. Don't be mad at me as it wasn't that bad, but as I mentioned earlier, the ending felt straight out of an MCU movie. Granted, it came out a year after Endgame, so big boss fights were so in at the time. Regardless, we were rewarded with some hilarious moments between Grug and Phil, plus a great closing to Eep and Guy's romance arc. Not to mention, the design for the monster was great. It was like a bamboo Godzilla. Boozilla, Bamzilla, God Boo. Why does that feel like a Dragon Ball character? Anyways, the big bad was pretty bizarre, but the movie itself was low-key pretty bizarre on its own, so it's fine. The animation was brilliant. I had to adjust to it watching it so closely to the first Croods, but god, the lighting was spectacular. The little movements and facial expressions were done well too. Like, Phil had to be the most fun character to look at based on how real his movements and expressions felt. The environments were gorgeous. Once we saw the treehouse, I was actually annoyed with the Croods for making a mess. All around, just such a great watch. It was definitely better than the first one for me, but the climax definitely felt a bit random regardless of the earlier hints.
But there's so many of them. Sorry, Grug. I'm afraid we have one house rule here. We don't eat the bananas.
I'm gonna give the Croods a new age and A tier. A high A, like over Puss in Boots. Great watch.
And besides, prom is a post-colonial patriarchal
Patriarchal
construct.
Exactly.
Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken was a pretty, it wasn't a bad watch for me. I went into it knowing that the film catered to a younger crowd, but it was still enjoyable throughout. The story follows a teenage Kraken who is trying to fit in with the human world, while simultaneously keeping her identity a secret. Her goal is to go to prom with Connor, as being a normal teen is important to her. This wouldn't come easy as prom would take place on a boat, and Ruby, being not only a Kraken but a royal one, will grow in massive scale when entering the ocean. This would lead to the introduction of her natural enemy, the Queen of the Mermaids, whose goal is to steal the Triton and dethrone the Krakens, as they are the only true protectors of the sea. If you can't tell, I didn't really feel like summarizing this one, so that was much more than it needed to be. Anyways, I heard this movie got a lot of negative press since Narissa, the mermaid, was pretty much a knock at Ariel. Bad timing considering the controversy around Halle Bailey's Ariel at the time. You'd think the movie came out 10 years ago. But anyways, I did enjoy the twist on Kraken lore. It's not new to see mermaids be evil. If you watch enough pirate films, you know this, but as far as I know, Krakens never get the opportunity to be a hero, let alone be a character. So I welcome the change, and I love the other characters. I got some Turning Red vibes from this. You know, a metaphor about a girl going through her cycles, puberty or whatever for the first time. I don't think it was as clever as Turning Red, but I still think they did a good job. That is assuming that's the hidden message they were going for. Ruby was a great protagonist to follow. Sure, she was a bit annoying in her exchanges with her mother, but when you look back to your own time as a teenager, it's actually done really well. I did enjoy Narissa a bit, but I felt her character was used too much as a joke on Ariel, that she sort of became a joke on the film. Perhaps had we known her true identity early on, her impact or just her presence throughout the film would have been more compelling. I think early in the film she could have been given a Ursula kind of monologue where we get an understanding of her intentions. That way when she introduces herself to the students, we can get subtle hints to her secret identity. Give her a trait that's unique to her rather than a pointless knock at Ariel. Have her human form have green eyes or something so that we get the hint that this is the villain who is a threat to Ruby. Better yet, you give her the red eyes that would be seen in her final form. I think this would have been cool. Think of when the evil queen in Snow White transformed into the old witch.
Begin thy magic spell.
My hand!
Is
guys.
Looking at this, we could see Narissa enter her human form rather than a secret identity altogether. I don't know, anything to make her character the least bit more interesting, because at the end of the day, a great villain makes a great film. I did really like the animation though. In the new world of Spider-Verses, Mitchells, and Mutant Mayhems, it was nice to see a stylized take on 3D that wasn't too out there. The Krakens moved so fluidly, well, I guess most of the characters did, but the Kraken specifically moved as if without a spine, which I'm pretty sure they said they had no spines. Regardless, I love the animation. The settings were beautiful, the art direction here was done really well, everything felt organic. It was pretty rare to see sharp objects. I think I left the film favoring the mom the most. She was a hard worker but also a good mother. Sure, she kept Ruby Kraken's heritage from her, but I liked how she was able to learn from her mistakes, understanding that her actions could ruin her relationship with Ruby, the same as her relationship was ruined with her mother. I really wanted Narissa to be my favorite character, but I'm mad they put more effort into her being a knock at Disney than just being a more interesting character. It sucks because there are a lot of fun things here outside of that. The side characters. The ending boss fight was predictable but fun, and it was ultimately a really pretty film to look at. All in all, I'm gonna give this one a C, a high C.
Lead them to the hidden world. You'll be safe there. Safer than you could ever be with me.
Okay people, so I know I've said this a lot, but again, this is my first time watching a movie and it did not disappoint. After getting my hopes too high for Kung Fu Panda 3, I was worried about this one, but was genuinely surprised by how well this story concluded. Well, if it actually concludes. The kids may end up getting a franchise or something in which it's hypocritical to what I've said in the past about sequels, but darn it, it's How to Train Your Dragon. Anyways, this story follows Hiccup and the dumb Vikings, plus Astrid, Eric, Valka, and hey, Gobber's not dumb, but they are running full on dragons. They spent the last few years saving captured dragons, and it's finally caught up with them. You see, the people capturing the dragons were fed up, so they called in Grimmel the Grizzly, a cunning dragon hunter. Now, if you remember what I said about the second movie, you know Drago wasn't particularly an interesting character to me. Grimmel, on the other hand, was much more interesting, or at least a lot more threatening, which may sound crazy given the stature of the two villains, but they did a great job showing how impressive Grimmel was in dangerous situations. Hell, he infiltrates Berk like it's nothing, and proceeds to tear the place up. Granted, Hiccup planned well against this, but it was Grimmel who got the last laugh, and unlike Drago, it didn't feel like his presence was carried by the dragons, and as far as Berk goes, they did an amazing job with the world building. I saw a couple complaints about it becoming too cartoony, how not just the village, but the Berkians were becoming way too colorful, going against traditional Viking aesthetics. And I don't mean to disrespect the culture, but these aren't real Vikings. Besides, at one point Hiccup calls the Berkians dragon people for crying out loud, so for them to make significant changes to the aesthetics of their culture, it doesn't surprise me much that they developed a look centered more around the dragons of their world. All that to say, great world building. Valka returned in this one, appearing more as a guide for the Vikings in their dealings with dragons. She wasn't as entertaining in this one. I mean, the most interesting thing about her was her appearance, as she looks younger. I don't know, but I feel like she lost some of those cheekbones that we saw in the second film. Fishlegs, the Nut Twins, and Snotlout also returned. Rough Nut in particular had a funny scene.
Oops, you let the dragons out. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. No, this one's gonna get you.
Take him and go! Please! I beg you!
She was quite dumb in this one. Like, you gotta know you're being followed. I don't think that came as a surprise to anyone. But what was the deal with Snotlout? He was a jerk in this movie, more so than ever, I'd say.
Who died and made you chief? What? Ow!
Like, bruh. And don't get me wrong, any guy who has a friend group of, well, guys, can agree that our friends make inappropriate jokes about each other's moms occasionally, but dude was really trying to get some action. Like, if we're killing important people like Stoichkov, boy, do I have a guy for you.
Look, Death, you made a mistake. I'm not really supposed to be dead.
Oh, I made a mistake, huh? Then what do you call this?
Hiccup was great as always in this, but I loved how in this story he had to accept the dragons were not pets. They're wild animals, and you've got to let them be free. After watching the movie, I watched a couple videos of how others felt just because I was surprised by how good it was and wanted to see if others agreed. I was surprised by the number of people I saw that said how they were disappointed that the film made the humans appear clingy, specifically Hiccup towards Toothless. I didn't see it that way. Here's the thing, as far as we know, Toothless and the Light Fury are like the last of their kind, regardless if they're the same species or not. So when Toothless looks annoyed in this scene, It's not because he doesn't love Hiccup, it's because maybe he recognizes the responsibility that he carries. Don't forget, Hiccup and Toothless were said to be near the same age in the second movie, so Toothless has grown up just as much as Hiccup has. Toothless loves Hiccup, but just like Hiccup has grown and found love, Toothless wants that opportunity too. So I love their development, and it was my favorite plot point for this story. I mentioned it a minute ago, but I do think this sort of goes into humans' obsession with keeping wild animals as pets. I get that sometimes it's about preserving a species, but let's not act like we don't take it too far sometimes. Anyways, let's dive further into the Light Fury. Although her design was nice, she wasn't much of a character in this. I can excuse it since it wasn't really about her, but she is pretty important to Toothless, so I guess a little more detail about her would have been nice. The movie was long as is though, so maybe not. One complaint I did actually have involved Toothless' tail. Part of what made Toothless awesome was how he maneuvered with his disability. They kind of threw that entire thing away to justify Toothless being on his own. They even made the tail indestructible. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but I thought that was kinda lazy. Besides this, seeing Hiccup and the rest of Berk set their dragons free was truly something, and was pretty heartwarming to say the least. As the film wraps up, Astrid and Hiccup get married, and you know, good for them. Overall, the movie truly felt like the conclusion to a wonderful franchise when both Hiccup and Toothless reunite their families. Bittersweet knowing it may be the last time we see these characters, but at least it ended on a high note. I can't put this up there with the S tier movies, but I feel strongly about putting this in A tier. Truly a fantastic franchise.
Oh, well, what's that? All of the magic in the world. For me, and no one else gets any. Is that so much? Yes!
We finally reached a film that may very well be the movie that changes the art direction of future DreamWorks projects, if not all, then at least the Shrek franchise. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. The king of sequels did it again because this movie feels so drastically different from the first Puss in Boots, it's laughable. And I enjoyed the first one. This movie follows Puss in Boots as he looks to get a wish from the shooting star so that he could restore his 9 lives. The story introduces us to Perito, Jack Horner, Goldilocks, and the 3 bears. The return of Kitty Softballs, and Death himself. Woof. There is so much to love about this movie. The movie starts out with great action as Puss goes against this giant monster threatening the town of Del Mar. I think I love this scene so much because I love when small characters face off against giants. Shout out to Attack on Titan. But the film is just non-stop fun. But what I think shocked people the most was just how they handled the character Wolf. His design is incredible, and the entire aim of the team behind The Last Wish was that they wanted Wolf to be genuinely terrifying, seeing as he is death personified. To accomplish this while simultaneously having a film jam-packed with other antagonists is pretty impressive. Wolf has definitely become one of my favorite animated villains. Seeing Puss in fear for the first time, suffering from a panic attack, I mean, you'd forget this is a DreamWorks movie. I also love the addition of Perito. His character could have easily been annoying, but he ended up being the heart of the film. The film did a great job with other characters that you probably wouldn't have guessed would have much focus, but Goldilocks has an entire arc dedicated to her that fits the story so well that I don't think the movie would reach its full potential without her. It was also nice to get a one-dimensional villain again, which is crazy to say, but growing up on Disney movies where their best films featured one-dimensional villains, and then they just stopped doing it, which I get, but when your more thought-out villains aren't that great and lack any personality, it just becomes a bummer. DreamWorks got us covered though. Jack Horner is an elite villain who is only enhanced by the greatness that is this wonderfully voiced bug.
You're horrible! You're an irredeemable monster!
What took you so long?
This movie had so many things to love, but what really worked was Puss realizing in a beautifully animated fight against Wolf that his life was worth fighting for. This is one of the few movies where I had no issues with it. It did slow down once Puss retired, but it wasn't so long that it ruined the film for me. As I mentioned earlier, this new style of animation may very well be the look going forward for the Shrek franchise. If so, I'm glad because this movie was just so beautiful to look at. Western animation is making your boy proud, man. I obviously won't be diving too deeply into this movie just like I didn't with the others since this is more of a tier list than a review, but I promise I'll dedicate a more detailed analysis on this movie in the future. Overall, this movie goes S tier for me. It doesn't beat Shrek 1 and 2, but it's right there, bro. I just think this movie was done so well and gives me a lot of hope regarding the future of DreamWorks.
My father had the right idea about how to deal with your people.
Ramesses.
And I think it's time I finished the job.
Ramesses.
We have reached the final film in this long video. The Prince of Egypt. This is the story of Moses and how he led his people to freedom. Now, here's the thing. I have no idea how accurate this story is, as I am not a religious man. I of course believe there's something up there, at least I hope it is, but I'm tied to no religion. As far as I know, everybody's right, but anyways, let's talk about the film. It starts with an incredible score as you look at the slaves constructing Egyptian sculptures and various architecture. The backgrounds are some of the most beautiful backgrounds I've ever seen in an animated film. I mean, this just looks real, man.
Our only thought is to amuse yourselves by tearing it down.
The animation is stunning. I'm not sure how much rotoscoping is used, but the movements are so smooth and lifelike, and I'd have a hard time imagining that rotoscoping wasn't used at some point. There were scenes in here that I still can't comprehend how it was done. Take Moses' dream sequence. Before I get to how terrifying this scene was narratively, can we discuss the animation? Like, how did they do this? I'm assuming it's CG. Perhaps it is, but it works so well. It's trippy. It's perfect for a dream sequence. Wow, man. Every time I look at it, I'm amazed. But let's talk about this scene. At this point, Moses is told that he's a Hebrew man. This comes as a shock to him, but his dreams reveals the answers he's looking for. This is a tier ranking, so I should save a deep dive for later, especially for this movie, but there's so much context to add to this. How many times has Moses seen this mural? Did he ever question it? Did he even want to question it? When Seti approaches him, he tells Moses that the Hebrews' population was rising too quickly, and he only wanted to protect his people. It's insane how when you look into his eyes, you can tell he believes it. The last words Moses hears from his father is chilling.
Oh, my son. They were only slaves.
Intense. Well, this wouldn't be the last time we see this mural. We see it years later with Ramesses' son. Look at the foreshadowing of what's to come for the child.
Ramesses, you bring this upon yourself.
Moments like these made this movie for me. I was glued to the screen. Again, I don't know how accurate the story was to the religion, but Moses and Ramesses paired so well with one another. I felt their bond, not only as brothers, but best friends. So when Moses was given his mission by God, you can see it in his face that he was disappointed by what was to come. Speaking of God, this dude was flexing on Beavis and Butthead over here. He tried going easy on them at first, turning a staff into a cobra and whatnot, but Hotep and Huey wanted to show out with a little song and dance. God even let them have that one. Then this happened.
Father, it's...
Blood!
Hey, I mean, I got a couple Kool-Aid packets I can whip up. I mean, okay. F them kids. So yeah, he had a point to prove. Jokes aside, incredible scenes, man, with great music to go along with them. Speaking of the music, they did have to grow on me, but there was some great music here. Deliver Us, especially the mom's part, was so angelic. I definitely had to add that one to my animated movie song playlist. I must admit though, Through Heaven's Eyes was one of those songs that pissed me off. I don't know why. Sometimes you just feel a way about certain songs. The rest were amazing though, and credit to the voice actors for doing their thing. I think overall, this is the perfect movie. Not the perfect DreamWorks movie, not even the perfect animated movie, simply the perfect movie. This was the easiest movie for me to rank. Not only is it S tier, but in my opinion, it's the greatest DreamWorks movie of all time. And with that, we are done. Yep. And you know, I hope you guys like this tier ranking. If you couldn't tell by now, I am not much of a reviewer. I'm pretty sure I cringe whenever I speak ill of any film. Except Shark Tale. My vendetta with this movie is purely justified based on how many times I was forced to watch that nonsense. But when looking at the tier list as a whole though, I'd say DreamWorks is a hell of a studio. I hope you like the artwork too. I did more with this one. I did give it a rushed background to make it appear more finished compared to the last one, but by the time I finished drawing these characters, I was just over it. When it comes to these rankings, I kind of want them to be a rare occurrence. Like, for example, part 3 of the DreamWorks tier list probably won't come for the next 5 years or so, as I obviously have to wait for more movies to come out. I'll do a Pixar tier list, a Blue Sky tier list, and even a Disney one much sooner, but I don't want to force them out too quickly as my channel mostly focuses on a single topic centering around one film at a time. I know for one thing though, I'm only doing 10 movies at a time regarding to these tier lists. More than 20 is just, it's a lot. But for y'all, the pain was worth it. All in all, I appreciate you giving me your time, and I hope I didn't waste it. If you like this video, then hit the like button, my dude, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until next time.